Consolamentum, which appears to have involved an explicit renunciation of the cross and the church. Those who had taken the Consolamentum were expected to live this extremely strict ascetical life. So extreme fasting, extreme measures of penance, extreme poverty, everything to eliminate the influence or attachment to the material world. Now this is where it starts to appear to uneducated, unformed Christians to be more in conformity with the Spirit of Christ than the worldly trappings of certain bishops and kings who claim to be Catholics, and even abbots and papal legates coming to preach to them with all kinds of worldly trappings and this newfound wealth, that those who are not formed in the faith, knowing just a little knowledge gets people in trouble, right? So knowing a little bit, these perfect members of the Catharists seem to be more observant, more convinced of what Christianity is about than these members of the church. And this is what starts attracting people to their following. Heresies usually have at least an element of truth to them, and then the error sneaks in around the element of truth. And this is what happened. Now, those who had taken this Consolamentum, there's evidence that there is returning to the licentious life that they may have lived before was strictly forbidden, and they were encouraged to commit suicide rather than do that. And so suicide itself was started to be praised, or started to be seen as something a very virtuous, as that final release from the material world, right? That release of the spirit from the material world. Again, it's not so foreign to the world we live in now, if you look at the Right to Die movement and all. The perfect lived those very austere lives. Now, so this is, by this point, it's almost 100 years that this heresy has been growing and spreading. And many of the believers, or the common folk who were not members of the perfect, passed part of the time as Catholic and part of the this lukewarmness and this openness to the spreading of the heresy. So you can see what some of the social consequences would have been. It's the destruction of the family, right? The destruction of the family and the destruction of society. Destroy the family, you destroy society. And we're seeing that today, lived out slowly. But again, this is a 100-year process here, and we're just have everything on fast forward. And in southern France, what strikes the match to the powder keg is when a papal legate by the name of Peter of Castelnau is murdered by a knight of Count Raymond of Toulouse. So Raymond of Toulouse, he's the prince in that area, that pink-shaded area there. And he is rumored to be very friendly with the Albigensians, actually well disposed to them. Maybe even a believer in the sect himself. Wants to do nothing to hamper or impede the spread of their beliefs. But when the papal legate, who had been preaching in various towns at this point for 8 or 9 years, is murdered by one of the knights of Raymond of Toulouse, this launches or sets off what becomes the Albigensian Crusade, a 20-year affair in southern France. At this same time, in the year 1206, if you remember, it was mainly centered in southern France, but there were certainly contingents or followers in northern Italy. This same type of thing. We have the year 1206 is basically the year for the founding of both the Franciscans and the Dominican order. And both of these are responding to very similar things. Although there's Saint Francis isn't necessarily setting out to he's not necessarily setting out to be the church's answer to this heresy, but his life that he leads turns out to be that. And the life of Saint Dominic is he discovers the Albigensians in southern France in the year 1203, when he and his bishop Diego are sent up to northern Europe to secure a bride for the local prince in Spain. And they talk to the king and talk to the princess, and they get the agreement, and they come back. And he notices this whole region where people are now ignorant of the faith. They have fallen away. And it causes a great sadness in his heart. And he and the bishop both begin to talk about the beauty of dedicating their lives for the spread of preaching for the salvation of souls, preaching the doctrine of the church. So one of the problems that caused all these people, so many people, to fall into this heresy was the lack of formation in faith, right? The lack of that full understanding of the faith, of dedicating their lives to preaching being with the people in these increasingly urban settings. Because if you think back 100 years at this point,